Today, we are tackling one of the most epic old world models you can put on your table, Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon. This model caught my eye when I was walking among the table stands at ReaperCon. She was on sale and I thought, well, this will make an awesome tutorial. Let's begin, shall we? First things first, she's massive. I actually had to adjust my usual camera setup just to fit her in frame. For primer, I'm starting with my usual go-to, Montana Black. This time, I'm also testing some of the new paints that Gallery just released. There's been a lot of buzz around the Kaleido line, and I want to see if it lives up to the hype. I'm not just testing the paint though, I'm also testing their primer, and most importantly, their thinner. If you follow me for a while, you know I'm always on the hunt for the perfect thinner. Something that lets me push detail without worrying about dry tip. When I saw Gallery's thinner comes with a built-in retarder, I knew I had to try it. So here's the plan. After priming in black, I'll spray a zenithal light from above, using Gallery Grey Primer, and we'll see how it performs right from the start. Instant lighting, instant contrast, and it saves a ton of shading time later. Today, we're going to be working with an airbrush that needs no introduction. Most likely the best-selling airbrush on the planet. It's the one both beginners and experienced painters reach for because it does just about everything. Of course, I'm talking about the Iwata Eclipse. A full review of this airbrush will be coming up next on the channel. Am I excited about it? Honestly, not really. I have no idea how I'm going to make a review of the Eclipse not boring, but I'll do my best. Now let's start blocking in some color. This time I'm approaching things a little differently, and I'll explain the reasoning later on. Instead of starting with shadows, I'm jumping straight into the midtones. Because I want this dragon to read as a two-tone creature, I've laid down a rich violet across the midsection of the body, while the arms, legs, spine scales, and head are built up with a deep blue. To push the definition further, I use lighter variation of those tones to airbrush the most prominent raised areas, which instantly enhances the depth created by the zenithal undercoat. And a quick apology here. The camera didn't capture the moment I sprayed down the violet layer. That was my mistake, but don't worry, you'll see the two-tone effect clearly as we move forward. Now let's move on the armor. I want it to read as bronze, but with a strong orange undertone that makes it feel fiery and alive. To get there, I'm starting with a speed paint metallic, and then I'm enriching it by mixing a little orange ink. To control the mix, I'm adding Vallejo retarder. And it actually plays two key roles here. First, it extends the drying time, which means I can apply the metallic smoothly without worrying about pulling. Second, because Vallejo retarder is naturally thick, it balances out the dilution from the ink. That way, I keep the vibrancy of the color while restoring a nice, workable density to the paint. Once it's mixed, I layer it across the armor panels, and the result is exactly what I'm aiming for. A bronze that shimmers, but with a bold orange cast that ties perfectly into the storm-charged look of the dragon. And to wrap up this first stage of the process, I'm finishing off the remaining section of the model. I'm applying a natural skin tone to the ears, a deep red to the gums and tongue inside the mouth, and painting the horns in a solid black to frame the face with some contrast. For the rocky formation that supports the model, I'm keeping it simple, just a mix of contrast paints to establish the base texture quickly. I'm also using contrast paint on the belt that holds the armor together, which keeps it cohesive while saving time for the more detailed stages later. With these areas done, the entire dragon has its first layers of identity. And now we can move on to the next phase of this process. Before moving on the detail work, it's time to lock in what we have done so far with a protective coat of varnish. For this, I'm testing out the new Gallery Matte Varnish. Let's see how it performs. I like to drop a small metal mixing ball into the bottle before shaking it. Varnishes tend to settle at the bottom, and a mixing ball helps resuspend everything evenly. The Gallery varnish looks pretty thin out of the bottle, so maybe it doesn't even need it, but I like it anyways. Through the airbrush, the varnish sprays beautifully. It feels smooth, no clogging, no struggling, which is a very good sign. Now the real test will come over the next few steps, when we see if it dries strong and actually protects the surface as advertised. And now it's time to bring in something completely new, a technique I've been planning for a long time. I wasn't sure which model would be worthy of showcasing it, but this dragon feels like destiny. So brace yourself, because this is the spaghetti erasing technique. For this step, we're going to be working with Createx illustration colors. These paints are highly pigmented, very fine acrylics designed for airbrush work. They flow smoothly, have excellent transparency, and they're perfect for layering, glazing, and erasing technique like the one we're about to do. For this dragon, I'm selecting darker tones to match each of the base colors we already applied. A deep violet and a dark blue. I'll be mixing them about 80% paint to 20% Createx reducer and adding a couple of drops of Createx retarder. The reducer keeps the flow smooth through the airbrush, while the retarder slows drying just enough to give me control. I spray these darker tones across the dragon, violet over the midsection, blue over the spine, underbelly and head. At this point, the whole dragon looks shaded down and darker, almost like I pushed all the light away. That's exactly what I want. To reinforce the depth, I then apply Payne's Gray to the deepest section of the model and across the armor. This extra layer pushes the shadow further and anchors the bronze armor tones to the overall scheme. Step 1 is complete. Now we let it dry. About an hour or so should be enough. Once the surface is ready, we bring in our trustworthy rotary tool. I use a Melody Susie nail drill. It works great for this kind of application, and the battery lasts a long time, which makes it perfect for a big project like this. For the erasing itself, I take regular Q-tips, cut them in half, and insert one into the chuck of the rotary tool. Before turning it on, I dampen the current tip with just a few drops of water, not soaked, just lightly humid. Then I activate the tool and start carefully running it across the surface of the model. The spinning Q-tip gently rubs away the paint from the raised areas, revealing the lighter tones underneath. What you get is a natural highlight, with smooth transitions where the paint fades back into the shadows. It's blending and shading all at once, without ever needing a fine brush. What I like about this technique is that it's perfect for large models like this dragon. It's also very easy to do and requires basically no concentration at all. For me, it's a super relaxing process, almost therapeutic. And it still delivers incredible results. Oh, and by the way, the gallery matte varnish is fantastic. This rotary tool applies quite a bit of force on the model, and yet the paint and varnish layer stays completely intact. No chipping, no lifting. That's a big deal, because it proves the surface is protected and the raising technique can be done safely without damaging all the work underneath. And now we move into the spaghetti dry brushing. And just like before, we are using the Melody Suzy rotary tool with the Q-tips attached. But instead of erasing, this time the spinning tip is going to apply paint. I'm loading the Q-tip with oil paints in lighter tones, paler violets and blues, and then whipping away the excess so only the thin layer stays on the cotton. The mechanical action of the rotary tool does the rest. As the tip spins across the surface, it catches all the raised areas of the model, instantly highlighting them, all while preserving the shadows underneath. The beauty of using oils here is the long working time. If I make a mistake, I can easily correct it with mineral spirit. The paint also blends naturally into the layers underneath, which makes the highlights feel smoother and more organic. And for the armor, I'm adding a blend of metallic oils. As the rotary tool runs across the bronze plates, the metallic sheen picks out edges and details, making the armor pop with a polished finish, again while keeping the darker tones in the recesses. So in one step, this technique blends, highlights, and ties everything together. It's fast, forgiving, and incredibly effective. The spaghetti dry brushing. Now it's time to go back to the Iwata Eclipse and bring everything together with some airbrush blending. Up until now, every step, even the spaghetti erasing technique and the spaghetti dry brushing, has already built-in blending between layers. But here we're going to push this transition even further with some glazing. For this step, I'm working with midtones and dark tones. The key is dilution, and I mean heavily diluted. I'm mixing about 5–10% of paint to 90–95% of thinner. When I mix this thin, I can apply multiple translucent passes without ever overpowering what's already on the surface. I'll be using blues and violets for the dragon. And for the armor, I'm spraying a gold speed paint. Yes, for the first time, I'm actually running metallic through the airbrush, but with a model this size, I'm confident it can handle it without issue. The metallic glaze adds a smooth richness to the bronze, tightening it with the rest of the blends. Once the glazing is finished, it's time to really intensify the shadows. This is where we bring in the inks, dark tones that settle into the recesses and amplify the contrast. The combination of smooth blends from the glazing and sharp depth from the inks creates the final pop of definition across the whole model. We are basically at the finish line now. For this last step, I'm switching back to a regular brush and picking out the most extreme highlights, focusing on the areas that were most erased or need the final pop of definition. These sharp highlights bring everything together and give the model the extra spark. And honestly, I'm very impressed by the new Gallery Kaleido paint range and everything that comes with it. The paint itself is excellent. The varnish and primer both perform beautifully, and I was especially impressed with the thinner wheel retarder. It atomizes smoothly through the airbrush, lays evenly on the surface, and the finish feels resilient. I pushed this model pretty hard with the rotary tool during the spaghetti erasing technique, and between the paint and the varnish there wasn't a scratch. Maybe a couple of tiny spots, but those were easily covered with a quick highlight. Overall, I'm impressed enough that I think I'll make a dedicated video just on this range, because it really surprised me. If you enjoyed this video, leave it a like and subscribe, and join me in the pursuit to become the fastest airbrush slinger in the West. Hey!